I like how it gives you the option to leave the meeting right then.
Yeah.
Right.
Get out.
Go ahead, Felicia.
Okay. All right. Well, good morning, Berkshire Hathaway Home Services of California. So happy to see all of you online. We're so privileged and honored to have our very own Darren with us with legal to give us some insight. So get your pen, paper, computers, and get some notes ready. Darren, thank you so much for making time for us.
Wow, there's a lot of you today.
Yeah, we've got 60 so far.
Is it just me? Do I just go?
Go.
You go.
We're
You're the
not gonna
whole
have, like,
show
the-
today.
Nobody's going to get up and pitch a home warranty or something
Nope.
in front of me?
None
All
of,
right.
none of that today.
None of
Cool.
that.
Thanks for having me. So not far from you, one of your other offices called me about Christmas and said, hey, why don't you do a meeting and talk about staying out of trouble or whatever. And we chatted and I said, you know what I should do? I should just write down the last 5 things that have happened and we'll go over them as examples. So, I took the names out and whatever. So this wasn't even my brainstorm. It was Jenny, just a little north of you guys. So she gets all the credit. I made a little memo that I sent to the managers and they can email it to you later. There's nothing big about it, but if you wanted a reference or something,
Okay.
The great thing about these examples, in my opinion, is that they're really not technical, right? It's not like what does page 2 of the disclosure statement, the TDS say, or what's the most recent rule on, et cetera. How does transfer of title occur now with that wonderful new joint tenancy thing we have where you can actually name someone before you're deceased. You can leave it to your child. None of that matters in these things. This is all about management, good communications, trying to track down the actual paperwork and knowing your role in a transaction, and no good deed goes unpunished. The never-ending dilemma in real estate is that I would say that from the outset, the thing that happens with you all is that you know too much. You really do. You know more than plaintiffs' counsels. You know more than experts that get hired in real estate cases because you're doing it day in and day out. So when someone says something to you or you hear a fact pattern, you kind of know what's going to happen. And that is a problem we have because we have to remember that we're not supposed to know everything. And we're supposed to step back and let the wheels sort of turn and monitor it and do our job, which is keep everybody informed. And we don't do executive review. If someone sends us a piece of paper, we forward it instead of describing it. Okay, so let's get started. The first one of I need like an in-house band like they have on the late shows where I could do a drum roll, right? So this first one, very near to your area, lovely home, lots of greenery. So a lot of water use being done in the yard. And during the escrow, the inspector points out that there's a small flood going on in the backyard. You can actually see the flood with the naked eye. It's a small puddle, but it's rising up in the grass. We've all been there. One part of the grass is basically a swamp, right? We're talking a half inch of water, an inch of water. And so what happened was the inspector did their job and said, you should get a licensed contractor, a licensed landscaper contractor to look at this. And what happened was the buyer turned and said, what should I do? And our agent said, I have a wonderful landscaper. He's great. And I heard stories about him. I've since talked to him where he saved a party. It wasn't even his day to come. And he came and worked on the yard of the agent and, basically took the stress away and whatever, saved the party. And this landscaper is also used by the agent's friends, etc. Landscaper came out, said I could probably do that job for about $2,000, fix the plumbing. It's a sprinkler system, right? That was fine. We move forward, we close. The buyer's a little grumpy. he gets into an argument with the landscaper because he kind of wants more and more and more. Like, why don't you do this? Well, I thought you were going to do this. And it's like, well, no, I quoted you this number. The landscaper and the buyer break up. The buyer then turns on us and says, you know, I don't have a landscaper anymore to fix this problem, and it's your fault. And so we try to help him and whatever, and it explodes. So pretty soon, the buyer has a demand to us for about $18,000. So that's a new backyard, right? Starting with a small flood. This is the kind of water leak that if you didn't have heels on, you could get down and fix it yourself, right? If you own a rental or something, or if you have your own backyard, okay? And so that was the buyer, 18,000. Then he got an attorney. Then now the bid is 5K. But I said, well, if I give you any money, are you going to release the seller? No. If you want the seller released, it's $12,000. Because of course, if the buyer files against the seller, the seller will probably reach out to us and say, you know, it happens all the time. Like, what did you do wrong? I'm not going to be in this fight alone. And I knew that, so I couldn't do any type of settlement until it was global. Okay. Now the buyer's attorney has sent mediation paperwork to the seller. The seller is very upset, has contacted us, wants to know what's going on, etc. And so let's rewind the tape. So here we are. Let's do the whole scene again. Remember, like when you watch a movie or a sitcom and they do a scene and then they do it again. Like, what if we didn't do that one thing? So if we rewind the tape, buyer turns to us and says, they say, I should get a licensed landscaper out here. Instead of opening up our private sphere, our personal friend, who I spoke to this gentleman. My concern is doesn't have the right licensing. He does a wonderful job. I'm concerned he's not even documented, and he's very stressed out. He is not happy that he has to deal with this. We have basically shook his world. You know, he was on a pattern of doing work for people, and now he's got this buyer who is attacking him. We're not, but we introduced him to this buyer. Okay, so rewind the tape. Mr. Buyer says, I need a licensed landscaper. Great. Let's find you 2 or 3 names. Licensed contract landscaper comes in, looks at the backyard, and what would they say? They'd probably say something like, I can do this job for $7,500. We would roll our eyes without letting anyone see, because that's a little bit high, right? Or the number would come in at a good number. Probably it would come in high though, right? The buyer would say, wow, that's a lot of money. I don't know if I want to spend that money. Well, it's your choice. I mean, you can cancel, you know, this is your purchase. We found this defect for you. That's our job. You know, we helped you helped you understand you can have a licensed contract. I mean, an inspector. This buyer knows this, so this buyer's bought and sold many, many, many homes in his life. So if the buyer had found this bid to be high, he could have said, you know, I don't want to do that. Let's ask for a credit from the seller. The seller would have said yes or no to a credit, and we would have moved on. And that's not where we're at. Where we are, I'm hot and heavy in it right now. We are nowhere near a resolution. We've just gotten started with the seller being required to go to mediation. Remember, we don't have a mediation mandate in our agency. It's in the purchase agreement where you get that, and then we have to voluntarily agree to it. So eventually the buyer's going to call me, the buyer's attorney is going to say, I want you guys to go to mediation. We're going to go to mediation. So now it's going to be, where are we? It's February 23rd. Yesterday was 22222. My sister, who is a teacher in California, wore a tutu to work. She works with little kids. Isn't that great? So she wore a tutu on 2222022. I thought that was awesome. So now we're going to spend, this started, I think, last summer, and here we are. It's going to be March soon. The sun's going to come back out. It's going to get hot again. And we're still working on this small little puddle of water in the backyard, all based upon us doing a favor for that buyer, right? Number two.
And Darren, they didn't do anything this whole time. The puddle of water is just still sitting there.
You know, I'm not sure.
Makes me crazy.
Probably, it's really not a big deal.
Yeah.
Right. I mean,
It's
it
probably
is
dried up
every
now.
time, I think probably the sprinklers come on and that area of the yard would get your socks wet, right? It's really not the end of the world, but it is a big, it's now, I mean, you know, you always wait, like, will they go away? I want to talk reasonable to the buyer. And I dealt with this buyer for weeks and weeks and weeks. And then he said, I'm too frustrated with you. I'm getting an attorney. Okay, that's either good or bad. The lawyer often can show up and say, you know, I think this case is worth something. It's probably not what my client thinks. Let's work it out. Great, let's work it out. No, first thing out of his mouth was, you guys caused this. You gave us that contract, that person. We relied on you. And then the buzzwords are, if it wasn't for this person, I wouldn't have bought this house, right? I would not have closed escrow if you didn't give me this handyman. And it's like, so the lack of the free will just goes out the window, and you end up with, I wouldn't have closed but for this, right? And it's so hard, it's really hard to combat that, because how do we know? I mean, here we are. It's easy to say, it's harder to unwind that, okay? But just think about how the simplistic of that is. Instead of opening up our person and giving him our favorite guy, we give him a person, a licensed contractor out of the book, right? I mean, there's hundreds of them in the area. I mean, it's all we deal with is landscaping. I mean, I live in the desert also, and every day I pull out of my house and look around and go, oh boy, I got to fix that this weekend, right? Moving on. Number 2. So here we're in escrow. This is all about transferring paperwork back and forth. We don't make an executive review. We forward paperwork. During escrow, there was a water invasion. It's a big one. The insurance had to get involved for the seller. We tell the buyer, hey, let's cancel. You know, we're in the middle of a big problem. Buyer says, no, I had a dream. God told me to buy this house. That's a quote. They wait around during the repairs, weeks and weeks and weeks of remediation by the insurance company. So we're talking pulling out the drywall down at the bottom, find a little mold, gets remedied, whatever. TDS is modified, mold was discovered, lets the buyers know, keeps the buyer in the loop. What we don't do is send the actual documents that we have from the insurance provided contractors to do the work. Buyer closes escrow, files suit against everyone under the sun in about 21 days. I kid you not. I got a 30 to 60 page demand letter with exhibits in under a month from a plaintiff's counsel, right? So the buyer got in and they looked around and they said, wow, they tore the whole house apart because they're going to do a remodel. And they said, well, there's mold here. And we said, well, we told you there's mold. We talked about mold through the whole escrow. There was mold remediators in the home for weeks while you were waiting to close. But you didn't tell me enough about it. So I think it's, you know, whatever. The entire time I dealt with that case, I thought this is silly. You know, if you do this a long time, you get a firm in Palm or wherever, and you see their name and you just go, oh my gosh, it's those guys. Because you know, they're never going to give up. Some of these law firms, I don't even know how they make money because they just take everything and they come after us and whatever. And so, I mean, I could have the same fact pattern from one firm to another, and one person will be like, we're going to work this out. We had a deal the other day. I sold a home and the backyard was not owned by us. The backyard was owned by someone else. There's a fence, there's a gazebo, you name it. We worked it out. I mean, it took forever, but I mean, there's a group of reasonable people, right? So anyway, back to this one. You know, we go through the rigmarole of, I think what happened is the buyer really didn't have enough money to complete the remodel, and then they started blaming us. And then the lawyer they hired said, yeah, it's absolutely 100% everybody else's fault, not your fault, even though you were told the word mold 10,000 times. They should have told you 10,001 times, right? And so, but during discovery, and we ended up going to a settlement conference. We got it worked out. And I didn't pay that much. I did pay something though. In discovery, we hand back and forth documents. Here comes the documents from the actual hired remediators. And there's a mold report. And in the mold report, it says there's a little bit of mold. And they're like, we never saw this. He said, well, I don't know why, Miss, I go to my agent, I say, why did we not send the mold report that gave a green light to get the house was completed to the buyer in escrow? Oversight. Just didn't think it was important. What I did is I had the TDS modified, and we thought that would be fine. And we, and I said, okay. And so that's what the plaintiff's counsel hung their hat on. They said there was a limited amount of mold still on the mold test. My people are very sensitive. If you had sent me that mold test, what would have happened? They would not have closed on the house. That's exactly what they said. So it's the theme. But for that, I wouldn't have closed escrow. And look what you've done to me. The only interesting thing is the buyer had to live in a mobile home in a trailer in the front yard throughout the whole litigation. And we litigated for like 4 years. And so they couldn't move into their house. I thought that was, I learned that in the settlement conference. And I thought, man, you think you guys would have, that's a pretty strong couple, right? I mean, you think you would have given up after the second Christmas or whatever,
Yeah,
living
for
in your
sure.
front yard, right? So
That's nice.
again, forwarding paperwork. How do I defend that case in the future? I mean, how do I instruct an agent to do a better job? We had a mold claim and we had a water invasion. Insurance got involved. We told them about it. We tried to get them out of escrow. Like, hey, let's cancel. We'll give you back your EMD. No, I want to stay in. We tried to keep them informed. And the last little inch, the ball didn't go over the line because we didn't send them the final paperwork. So the only thing I can think of, because you actually did a great job, is when we get info, we package it up and we forward it to the buyer. The third one is very similar, and it is really the indication of how to put it. You always want to forward the paperwork, not only like in this, remember we had the mold test, but sometimes contractors will tell us something on the form, or we'll learn something about the contractor. So in the next one, we had a house that was built during the Johnson administration. I don't know if anybody was around then, but that'll age this home for you. It has the repair request came in, and they wanted a new roof, not a repair. They wanted a brand new roof throughout. Not only the roof, they wanted the carport covered. The answer was no, but the seller did agree. So the the repair request gets, rejected. Another little baby one gets sent over, and it said, fix some tiles on the roof. Seller agreed to that. The language says a licensed contractor will fix those tiles. We're talking hundreds of dollars of repairs. The repair is not done by a licensed contractor. But that part comes up later. We do some repairs, we close escrow. Big windstorm comes, tears apart part of the roof, not even the part that was addressed in the repair request. It rains, water gets inside the house. Now the allegation is that my child's lungs are affected by moisture. There's the case. Again, rather ridiculous. Here we are, we're in litigation. I'm sorry, are you suing us over a disclosure of a roof when you yourself and your contractor and your inspector asked for a new roof? I don't know how more we can talk about a roof than you asking for a new roof. But again, here we are with the plaintiff's counsel, who is the thickest skin in the world, right? We go through discovery, and what did we find? There's a form that shows up, and the person that did the slight repairs on the tiles isn't a licensed contractor. It's a handyman. I contact the agent. I say, what's going on with the repair? Oh, that seller and I have known each other for years. I bought, sold. Great client. She's super grumpy, refuses to use anybody but her own team of people. So as much as I try, she will not do what I say to do, and she won't use a licensed contractor. The plaintiffs get wind of that, and they say, oh, we're going to amend our complaint to fraud. Because you guys were aware that we asked for a licensed contractor. You intentionally didn't use a licensed contractor. You lied to us. We think the whole case now needs to be amended and blown up because there's this deception that occurred. Again, if we had known that those few tiles were going to be fixed by a handyman, what did they say? I would not have closed escrow. I kid you not. This is what everybody always says. So, and I talked to the agent. I said, you were aware that she doesn't use a licensed contractor? Yeah, she's so grumpy. She just won't listen to me. And I said, okay, in the future, you can't have your clients sign something that they're going to breach right away. I mean, better, and even if we had taken that form and forwarded it to the buyer, we would have at least had the argument of, well, we told you what here's the form. It says Bob's handyman service, you know, whatever. He's clearly not a licensed contractor, and you were aware of that. At least we could have had that. We did not have that. And I said, you know, in the future, what you should do is don't let them sign something that they're just going to breach. Don't sign it. I mean, and this one is wacky, right? They asked for an entire roof. We could have just stuck to our guns and said, I'm not giving you anything. You know, I'll hand you $400 at close of escrow. That's what the repair cost. So it's just, you know, little tiny things like this that end up wasting our time. We went through litigation. We went to a settlement conference. Crazy thing is that seller and our agent remained close, because oftentimes you lose that relationship. And ultimately the seller just wanted to be done with it, and some money, was written. But anyway.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
So I see this frequently on the request for repairs where the buyer's agent types up that it's a licensed contractor must do the work. So the correct response, if we know that maybe the seller is going to do it themselves or they're going to hire a handyman, is to respond that way, saying, removing that request for the contractor and saying, what, like the owner will do the repair?
Yeah, you just want to clarify that the licensed contractor is not involved. You know, there's so many unlawful things we're allowed to do. We can sell a house in the backyard that is completely unpermitted, as long as the buyer is aware of it. And if the lender finds out, that could be an issue. But there's no problem with selling a zoning violation, or, you know, we realize we built the garage in the backyard on someone else's land. You know, as long as we tell them, we can do it. And in that one, if it's a baby repair, the best thing is to transfer cash back to the buyer. That's always your best bet. And I understand that it's very difficult sometimes, because the lender, for example, will want that repair done, or the buyer just doesn't want to deal with it and they want it done. But the minimum we can do is explain that, yes, we're using someone that we have used for years. They're not licensed, and your job as a buyer is to come and re-inspect, right?
Right. And so with regards to like transferring money instead, I've had that issue in the past where the seller transferred money on a termite repair instead. And then when they opened up the whatever, there was way more than what was on the report. And so that became an issue. So that's the only time I kind of cringe at just transferring money. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
It depends on what side you're on, right? Because if we're representing the buyer, we have to make sure the buyer understands that when we get this $400, that's it. And if we do more destructive testing and we get deeper into the home and we realize it's much greater, that's the buyer's responsibility, as long as they get that. But on the seller side, it's really the best bet, because, I've had horrible scenarios where a seller says, hey, I'll take care of it. It's not going to be done before close of escrow. I'll take care of it after close of escrow. And then the buyer moves in and finds more and more. And it's just like a blank check for the seller. I mean, they just keep paying and paying and paying. We had one where the well went dry, and the seller had to ultimately start trucking water in because they had committed as the seller to fixing the well problem. They thought it was something small, and it turned out it had to be drilled deeper. And, so yeah, so there's always two worlds, right?
Thank you.
In the end, getting that piece of paper of that handyman to the buyer would have been that would have helped a little bit. And let's look at it from this perspective of the buyer's side. We weren't the buyer's agent, but if we were, we would want to follow up on that repair and say, you say the roof repair is done, where's the documentation? Get it to me, get it to me, get it to me, get it to me, get it to me. Keep asking, so that when it does arrive, we can hand it to them, and then the buyer can make a decision. We had one where it was so odd. Only if you're in real estate would you believe this happened, but newer agent, and the buyer we found mold, and there was going to be a remediation. Seller agreed to it, but he didn't really. Because at the end of the day, when I got involved and I said, hey, you know, the buyer found mold after the fact, I'm sorry, during escrow, and you're supposed to fix it, and they've moved in and since found more. We just want to talk to the contractor who did the work. We don't understand. The seller said, I never said I would do that. And I go back and look at the paperwork, and he never did. He totally tricked our agent. It's hard to believe, but the buyer, you know, at the end of the day, we didn't have anything in writing from the seller that they would do it. And they even sent over a mold test at the end that was clean. I think they took the mold test inside a Clorox bottle because it was so clean. When we looked at the test after the fact, we realized there's always going to be a little bit of mold in your home, and there was zero. So we are like, oh, you guys must have poured bleach in the kitchen before the mold guy came in, and then whatever. The thing that saved us on that from the complaint, I mean, people can tend to be reasonable or unreasonable. This person was very reasonable. He knew, and he admitted to me that our agent attempted a zillion times to get that paperwork. A zillion times. He would say to the seller, where's the paperwork on the mold during escrow? And then he told the buyer, I can't get the paperwork. I can't get the paperwork. And the buyer said, I got a baby. I got a family. I got to get out of this one, get into this one, close escrow. And that's why we worked it out reasonably. He ruined all his carpet because he had to tear his kitchen out, use his hallway sink, and they're carrying spaghetti sauce back and forth in their home, and they ruined that part of their house. So we put new carpet in and got it worked out. So, but the saving grace was we were hunting down that paperwork. So if you go back to the roof repair, if we were on the buyer side, we'd say, you were supposed to do a small repair with the licensed contractor. I need the paperwork. The paperwork would have shown up, and it would have it was hugely obvious that it was not a roof contractor. It was just a handyman. And then the buyer can make an informed decision. Sometimes it's not the easiest thing or the best thing in the world to get that information as a buyer, because here we are in the middle of escrow, and the buyer has to make a decision if they're going to close and pursue those rights after. But knowledge is power. Our job often, even though it's not good news, is get the client news, right?
Hey, Darren, we have a question.
Is there a question? No.
Yes, I do actually. I do have a question. Since we're talking about this subject, about getting papers from handymans and contractors and whatnot, I just took a new listing yesterday, and it is in the coming soon status. The property owners installed a sink wash basin in an extra bedroom because she was using it as a hair salon. Everything in that bedroom can be removed and taken out that looks like a hair salon, no problem. But they don't want to remove that wash sink, that sink bowl that's been installed. I'm not sure if it was installed by the homeowner or if it was installed by a handyman. So my question is that going forward in handling this new listing and showings and whatnot, what would be the best way to protect my sellers and myself in going forward and avoid any litigation on this wash bowl? They don't want to remove it. They want to sell the house as is.
You just take a snapshot mentally of what's occurring and make sure the buyer gets that. It's interesting in real estate how horribly you can talk during escrow, and then the day after close of escrow, if the smallest defect is uncovered, it's the end of the world. So in this scenario, they would disclose that either they can't remember, they could just say, this is a unpermitted sink in a bedroom, and the buyer is advised to perform any inspections they desire. That is golden, right? What you wouldn't want to do is not mention it if you're aware in the back of your mind that it's probably, it's not a bathroom, right? And so how it got there, but you want to point it out and tell them about it, and then the burden shifts. Then the poor buyer has to make a decision if they want to just do nothing and whatnot. And every market is different. Right now we're in the seller's market. We've been through buyer's markets, right? In this situation, the buyer's not going to have a lot of power and to demand something. And they, depending on the history they've had in trying to purchase and or failed purchases, they may very well downplay it because they don't want their lender to know about it. So Our job is to simply take a snapshot of what we know. And that's the thing about a home, we don't live there. The seller does. So they're going to know more about the history and whatnot and what happened yesterday. And it's interesting when people don't want to, they talk to us and they say, I don't think I have to disclose that. It's like, why wouldn't you? Just tell the buyer everything you know. If you know that you did a major repair only 4 months ago, even though technically it is completed, why not use it as a selling feature to say, my son did this and we fixed it and here's all the paperwork. Okay. And you get that discussion out of it. So all you do is take a snapshot mentally of what's occurring and talk to them about the sink. And you don't ever want to, the worst is the better. So if you say, as far as we know, it's unpermitted. We think, I don't even know if my brother-in-law put it in, we can't remember. Then that's better for the buyers. So they can get a mental picture of what's going on. Make sense?
I did put it in the MLS. I did put in there that one of the bedrooms was used as a hair salon, and mentioning that there was a sink in that bedroom. So
good. And you want to make sure that the seller mentions it in their disclosure.
They did. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I just didn't know if there was anything extra we needed to do to protect ourselves.
Yeah. You're going to get sued anyway. I mean, it's inevitable. It's a joke. That's a joke.
All right. Thank you.
The first paragraph is going to be, and then my client found this sink, that they saw 25 times, but if they had seen it 26 times, we would not have bought that house, right? Okay, the next one is, there's no answer to this, but I share it because we're just in the market that is difficult. And this is just about training ourselves to communicate, to kind of reiterate what is occurring. This is a buyer, the seller who basically took us to the ethics board and we lost. And I was very surprised that we lost. This is a seller who took us to the real estate division and the real estate division rolled their eyes and threw it out in a minute because they said that nothing went wrong. We really pulled off quite a good transaction. We had a seller who needed to sell and then we were putting them into a new larger home in this market, FHA. In California. So, and we did it under 30 days. I was, I'm reading the file and I'm like, I can't believe we're in trouble for this one. But what happened is the seller almost had like post-closing stress. It was really hard on them. And they said they didn't want anybody else to have to go through that. And they filed an ethics complaint against us. And unfortunately, sometimes you get a panel or a judge who, in my opinion, it's really hard to be a judge because I don't really want to sit in judgment of people. You might have somebody come up to you and they've been damaged badly, and it's difficult not to blame somebody. And as the judge, your job sometimes is to say you're damaged, but it's not this person's fault. And then that's really hard to hear if you've been damaged, right? I mean, you can accidentally cause a car accident. And you weren't negligent. You're allowed to have your window down, and if a bird flies in and hits you in the face and you crash into somebody, you weren't doing anything wrong. You know how to drive. These things happen, yet someone else is damaged really badly. So in this situation, the seller is like, I want to be really attractive to the second home we buy. And they were knowledgeable and they told our agent, waive the appraisal, waive the loan contingency, use an acceleration clause, quick close, gamble. I know, and this is how we're going to get a house because we haven't been successful otherwise. We did it all. The acceleration clause got used. We sold the home and got into the other one in under 30 days. One of the things is when they sold their home, it was an investor buyer. And he said, if you want to stay post close of escrow, you got to pay a little money. A team of people who come in and they do repairs. And if you don't take this opportunity now, it's over. The window closes because I won't delay my crew. Our seller didn't want to pay the money, $500. We were going to do a transfer on the same day. We need the money from the sale to get into the next home. And we were going to move that day. We were going to pull it all off. We had a lot of balls in the air that we're juggling. And as we moved down the line, we had a little delay because the lender, for whatever reason, didn't like the way the money was coming and they wanted it to be right ripened longer. And so we were going to close the next day. And that caused a homeless situation for hours, literally, and where to put all the stuff, right? And so we have zillions of texts and emails from this client. And when you look at them, the reason I put this in is we want to train ourselves to communicate with our clients so that when they write back to us and say, you're terrible and you caused this and da, 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 we have to remind them, we didn't cause this. We didn't cause the price going higher. We didn't cause COVID. Well, some of you are a little bit responsible for it, but that was a joke. But his responses were so positive and so not combative that it almost looked like he was acquiescing to having caused these problems. And I said, why didn't you write back and say, well, it's just not worth it. I don't want to get into it with her. She's just like that. And it's okay. And I think part of it is his faith. And so it looked like we didn't know what we were doing, even though he got it sold. He got this done. He got this done. He managed, when we had the hiccup of not being able to put the stuff in, we hunted the seller down of the subsequent home, got a garage move in. They wouldn't even put it in writing. They gave it to us verbally. They never had any problem with it. He and his father moved their stuff till 2 o'clock in the morning. And then one of the tables got broken during the move, and that's still pending. They want money for that table. So my only point is, we can communicate with our clients where we remind them of what's going on, and then we solve it. So, hey, I know you're upset, and remember, you had an opportunity to do a post-close of escrow occupancy, but you didn't want to do it. And I probably would have said the same thing, but here we are. I know you're going to move in with your parents overnight, and now we got to get rid of your stuff. I have lined up a storage facility, which I haven't pulled the trigger on yet because I don't want to spend the money. But if I have to, I'm going to. And this is all true. He just didn't put any of it in writing. He just said, I know, I'm working on it. Okay. And then he ultimately got the garage move and whatnot. And, they woke up a month later and said, man, that was a horrible experience. And I'm going to attack my realtor for having gone through that. So when I went to the hearing and we talked about the ethics and whatever, I was super confident. And then we got back and we just got slammed. We should have done a better job, all these things. And it comes back to, how do I instruct my agent if everything they did is right? How do I train them to do a better job? They wanted to waive their inspection. We waived their inspection. How many times can we say, don't waive your inspection? It was all in writing. We had warnings. That's why the real estate division threw it out. So I only share that one because if you do get somebody upset in this market, it's very, very stressful, it's okay to go back in time and remind them why we're here, and then offer up a remedy so that historically it shows up in your texts and emails that you did not entirely cause COVID, right? I don't know which of you went to that. I think we're going to figure it out. It all started in Las Vegas. Everything starts in Vegas, right? I think there was one huge computer show meeting. I think it was in February. And that's where my brother-in-law got it. And he was with me, and nobody knew he had it. He said he just didn't feel well. Isn't that funny? Moving on. Isn't it great how short sales were 1,000 years ago? Pretty soon we won't remember COVID. We'll be like, was it COVID-19 or COVID-18? I can't remember. Okay, the last one. This is a really good one because this goes back to knowing our role. And isn't it interesting that all 4 of these examples so far have nothing to do with real estate? They have nothing to do with passing your real estate exam or being very knowledgeable about, oh my gosh, the 1031 exchange is this type of thing, and you have to do it on this many days, and people get confused on months versus none of that's, it's all just handling our clients, being honest, tracking down paperwork, keeping people informed, and not going outside of our 4 corners. So in this one, this is a great one because the seller calls us and says, my tenant is driving me crazy. The tenant keeps telling our future client, I'm not going to pay rent. It's $1 million house. I'm not going to pay rent. I don't have to pay rent by law during COVID. And when I don't pay rent, if you could pursue me, I'm going to file bankruptcy. I'm just letting you know. And the tenant said that forever, driving our seller crazy, fearing financial ruin every single month, right? Calls us, says this is what the tenant is saying. And we said, well, they're right. I mean, there is a government order that they don't have to pay rent, sort of. And then it's messy. And yes, probably if they don't pay you and then they file bankruptcy for bankruptcy protection, in our experience, you're not going to get all that money, or you may get nothing. Who knows? But what's going on? Well, he's paid his rent every month, but he keeps threatening me. Okay. Finally, the seller says, I'm done. The lease is almost up. I want out. I'm going to move into a different style of investment property that is a little bit less frantic. Okay, we can help with that. We can do replacement property. We can try to control the sale so that you have more time. You could extend escrow. I mean, it's kind of a seller's market, but they're very, very concerned. The seller is very concerned because once they sell their home and they go buy a subsequent home, they're going to be in the same competition with everybody else at the dance, right? So they're not going to be able to find a partner, right? And so we say no problem. The seller gave a first right of refusal to this tenant before we were involved, and we were aware of that. Okay, we got an offer, we list it, we get an offer, it's looking good. We got to take care of this tenant's first right of refusal though, so we send it over to the tenant, and what we don't do is shore up the sale to buyer number one. We just say, look, we got an offer, let's just show it to the buyer. It's a great offer, but let's get rid of that and then we'll work on this. We send it to the tenant. What's the tenant say? I'll take it. Open escrow, I can close in 30 days cash. So the buyer tenant was fibbing the whole time. They always had the money. It's unknown why they would do this. I have a theory that he owns a therapy service or something in the Valley. And this, maybe his family owns a psychology service or something to help people lose their minds, and he needed more clients. So here we are. The tenant says, I'll take it. I'll buy the house. And of course, the seller says, go jump in the lake. I hate you. I am not selling my home to you. And the buyer files a lawsuit and files a lis pendens on the property. And here we are. We have, and as of Christmas Eve, we got sued. I've been working on this since January of 2021, because that's the hot and heavy COVID restriction, no rent in 2020, moving into 2021. In the spring, we had some modifications. You had to pay a certain amount of rent, all that stuff. That's when we triggered the sale. That's when the buyer tenant said, I'll take it. That's when the seller said, absolutely not, over my dead body. I hate you. And now we're in litigation. We were sued Christmas Eve of this year, and I think I have it worked out. But we're not getting our $100,000 commission on the sale. We have found a subsequent property, and we are getting paid on that. But the relationship is just such a bummer. This seller, we had made money with them in the past, ironically, or interestingly enough, through Mexico, because they had bought and sold down in Baja, and our agent had received referrals on that. And so this is somebody that we were just waiting as a perfect client. This is just like a savings account, isn't it? You have a wonderful client who's calling you in confidence and saying, I want to sell my $1 million home eventually. I'm you, and we ruined it. So the seller's upset. We lost our commission and whatever. So we rewind the tape, and we pretend we don't know everything. So the sellers told us that the tenant is a bad person and they're not paying their bills. But we say, what's in front of us? We have a first right of refusal. Oh, you know what that means? That means if you get an offer, you have to tell the buyer, and let me see your lease. It's in the lease. Oh, they have this many days to accept or reject. Well, they'll never accept it because, the tenant is a deadbeat and he's ruining my life and he's threatening me and all these things. And we say, well, it could be true, but you never know. So let's do this. Let's take buyer number one. Let's negotiate. Let's get you in the best position we can put you into a control in the driver's seat so that you can potentially even extend escrow if you need to find your beloved replacement property. You need to do a 1031 exchange. You need to talk to these experts. Here's some phone numbers. And where do you want to look? Oh, you want to look up there? Great. I can actually handle that. Or if it's too far away, I can refer it out. Again, we'll take care of you. And then we'll get it all buttoned up, subject to the tenant not taking the offer. In this market, buyer number one would deal with those thin ice scenarios where they're like, what a nightmare. I'm buyer number one and I really want the house, but I have to wait for this tenant to usurp me. And so, but we set it all up and then we would send it to the tenant in the home. And when the tenant pulled the trigger and said, yes, I'll take it. Now our seller it's money. It's money is money. If it's coming from Hannibal Lecter or Mother Teresa, who cares? And then the seller would have said, wow, you guys are so smart. I never would have thought that tenant would have taken this offer. And yet you protected me and you set the whole deal up so that I'm in control to do my replacement properties and whatever. So as much as I don't like the buyer, and that's if they elect at that point as the seller to not deal with that buyer, there's nothing we can do. I mean, that's just, they are the ones who gave them the first right of refusal. But in a perfect world, they would have said, I can't believe you thought this through and didn't assume that the tenant was not going to make the payment or not going to be able to opt to buy. Boy, I'm protected. Let's move on. Let's get you paid on $1 million listing where there is no buyer's agent. And I need a subsequent property. Oh, and by the way, I'm in a knitting circle and all my friends need to use you, blah, blah, blah. That didn't happen. We have been in utter, I got an email Sunday of this past weekend. Our client, the seller, we've settled the case. We're going to work it all out. We're not getting paid on this current escrow with the tenant, but we are on the subsequent one we found. But our seller has fired their counsel as of Sunday. All caps emails, huge emails. Their lawyer that I helped them find, they're breaking up. They're withdrawing from the case. So I mean, the wheels are coming off as I'm getting this wagon across the finish line, right? And all of it is just, it didn't have to happen. All we have to do is not assume anything and go one step at a time. And we would have been so in a different scenario, right? And now we've just wasted, I have had zillions of phone calls with this agent where the seller calls them screaming at them. And I say, well, technically you're not supposed to talk to them because they're in litigation. And it's only a matter of time. They'll probably sue us and that is what happened when we got named in the case on Christmas Eve. You got to love that, right? Do you think process servers think that's funny? Like, they get a stack of it's like, who works on Christmas Eve? Ebenezer Scrooge, right? They're just like, yeah, we got like 17 people we get to go serve on Christmas Eve. We get to wreck everybody's Christmas. This is terrible. Great, right? What a waste of time and what a sad scenario where they have been calling. And anyways, what the amended complaint said was that we didn't have title, that we knew the seller wasn't going to sell to the tenant somehow, some way through discussions. And that's why they dragged us in. And it's a reach, but it doesn't matter. It's civil litigation. The judge is going to look at it. I can file a motion to dismiss or demur. They're not going to grant it. You know what they're going to say? Well, go do some discovery and let's meet back, end of March. It's like, oh, okay, let's all spend $10,000 for nothing. That's what all judges say, right? I don't want to make a determination now because you haven't done any discovery. Go waste all the money you can. I was in a depot yesterday for 4 or 5 hours. And it's just like, oh my gosh. And, unbelievable. There's 3 lawyers. Everybody's asking our agent the same question over. But did you think the client had a right to a view? It's like, well, how would I know that? But it's litigation. It's crazy. So we rewind the tape and we do it another way, and we're making money and we're not in trouble. So that's the 5th one, and not one of them has to do with anything but hand holding and talking objectively.
I have a question. So if the buyer has first right of refusal, why wouldn't we offer the buyer the first right of refusal before we even put it on the market?
Well,
Or
because
right
you know,
off the bat?
that's great. You know, on a side note to that, well, here's the deal. They don't have to opt. They don't have to bid against themselves. So if you have first right, you get to see what somebody else is paying, and then you get to match it.
Okay.
So you don't have an offer to say to them, give me your best offer. If it was written in a manner that said, hey, if I'm going to sell the house, here's what you get. I'm going to give you, see, it's weird to know the number. You'd have to write it up to something to the effect of, you know, we're going to get it appraised. We're going to get 2 appraisals. And the highest one, you have to agree to pay me that in 10 days, or I'm going to put it on the market free and clear without your burden. You know, something like that. But usually how they're written is, if you get an offer bona fide from a third party, then the tenant has the right to, you know, to match it. And so that's what happened. We got a wonderful offer from buyer number 1. We sent it to the tenant and he opted to take it. What we didn't do was take care of all her concerns about, and she was adamant. She was watching the market and she was so worried. I am so concerned that I'm not going to be able to, the emails, the texts are thick and through and through. They say the same thing. I don't want to be in the same position as other people. When I sell my house and it's super easy to sell it, I don't want to be that person who's struggling on the other end. I want to make sure I have control. And we said, we can totally take care of that. We can do replacement property. We can talk about it. We can negotiate strong. We can try to extend escrow. We didn't do any of it because we knew everything. And we said, let's send it to deadbeat tenant. Let TikTok, you got your days to run. And then I'm going to be in control and I'm going to go sell it. And the tenants blew everybody out of the water by saying, I'll close escrow in under 30 days with cash.
Yeah, all the cash that they were holding on to for not paying
Yeah,
rent.
and again, they never missed a rental payment throughout the entire 2020, ever. On time. They just were like teasing her or something. Like they were just crazy. I don't know why they did it. Okay, so those are the 5 examples. The only thing I want to talk about besides that, do I have more time?
Yes.
So I get a lot of questions about people that are waiving all their rights and yet they want something after the fact. There's really no answer to this. So buyer says, I don't want an inspection. I don't want an appraisal. Halfway through escrow, they say, I want an inspection. I want an appraisal. If you're inside due diligence, there's really no way to stop it. And if the seller calls me and says, hey, they said they didn't want an inspection and now they want one, and I think I'm going to deny them that right. I say, well, if they find something, if you don't give them the right to get back into the house and do an inspection, and they find something after the close of escrow, they're going to say, you hit it. You intentionally hit it. And you can't really get around the obligation to disclose. No matter what you put in writing, you're still going to be stuck if they find you with intentionally not disclosing something. Negligence is one thing, but oh, you knew about that mold problem, you didn't let us know. So my position is you got to let them back in and let them get that information. Let them do the appraisal. It doesn't have the relevance that it does. You know, if they have waived their appraisal contingency, then they can't really use it in their favor. But anyway, that's a tough one. The other one is because I'm seeing waivers of home warranties because buyers are a little stressed and they don't want to spend any more money. The sellers are really in control. Maybe the seller 2 years ago offered a home warranty. Now they're saying, I'm not even going to pay for that. And you turn to the buyer and say, I really think you should get a home warranty. And the home buyer says, I don't want to spend another 500, 900, whatever the heck it is. They should get a home warranty. Home warranties, they don't have to renew it per se. Home warranties are so important in real estate. You know, the thing about buyers, well, first of all, homes break and we don't know why. Maybe it's a change of use, right? Empty nester, didn't really use the house that much. New group moves in, 4 or 5 adults move in, 2 teenagers, whatever. More use, house breaks, something breaks. Buyers are blown away. You know, how can you as the seller say to me, you never had a problem with that, and yet I moved in and 72 hours later, my sewage backed up. Well, I can tell you exactly how it happened because, you know, we've got people who haven't been to that part of the house in 2 years, right? I mean, because that's what happens. I mean, my house personally, I grew up with 8 brothers and sisters. It was huge. I mean, my parents had a massive house and then they were all alone for years and 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 years. And you'd come home and use the back bathroom and say, Hey, did you know there's a raccoon living in the bathroom back there, Dad? Or whatever, right? Home warranties are so important because what you really want in that first year is a list to be provided to the buyer. You all know who to call. If you have a rental, you know who to call. Buyers don't know that stuff. When it's 105 and their air conditioning goes out, they need a phone number. They need somebody to reach out to vent with, right? Get the contractor out there. Once the technician is there, no matter the problem, dishwasher, washing machine, sewage backup, HVAC, the next thing is the warranty doesn't cover it. It doesn't matter. The most important thing is there's a technician in the house. Whether or not the $592 bill is going to be covered is a different story. If it's 105 and you got the technician in the house and they say, look, we have a problem, I don't think the warranty is going to cover it. At least we have the opportunity when they're calling, screaming, we can say, well, how much is it just to do it? Well, I'm here now and I can do the repair. I don't know if the warranty will ever cover it for you. It's $592. Guess how much you'll pay to get rid of 105-degree weather, right? You'll pay the $592. In the next phone calls, they're going to be that it's your fault as the tenant, as the agent, and we want you to pay the $592. Maybe we will. It depends on the relationship. But what you don't want, and somebody asked if it's okay for the agent to pay for the warranty for non-recurring closing costs. Sure, that's fine, as long as the the lender is aware of it. So what you don't want is the person unbelievably frustrated. They just made one of the most major purchases in their life, and they spent all this money, and now they are sitting on their couch. It's 105. Their kids are complaining. Their spouse is complaining. Their whoever significant other is saying, "See, I told you not to buy this house." But you really want that person in the home. They can sometimes be a thorn in our side because they'll say, "Oh yeah, this is crazy. They should have disclosed this to you." Whatever. But you know what they often say is, "Hey, I'm getting calls all over the valley. It's crazy. I'm so busy. After I leave you, I'm going to be busy for 7 straight days. But I'm here and I can fix it and da 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 da." That's what we want. Or they're going to say, "This happens all the time. I deal with this valley all the time. People, why the roots get into the pipes all of a sudden, who knows? But I've seen it many, many times." You want them to have that relationship with that professional. We have to, going back to, we assumed that tenant wasn't going to be able to pay the bills. You got to remember that what we think is simple is really hard on people. We know you got to call somebody when something happens. They don't have that list. They don't know who to call. They're just going to sit on their couch and vent, right? And get mad at us. That's why the home warranty is truly your best friend. And coverage is not even relevant. And the last thing is wire fraud. I can't, I don't know why, I don't know how these bad guys are still out there, but boy, oh boy, are they out there. Now with COVID a little bit lifted, we can tell our client, go to escrow, get the piece of paper for the wire. We have to really remind our client, I'm never going to tell you, I'm never going to call you about wire. I'm not going to email you and send you a new wire instruction. The ones that I've seen they're kind of ridiculous what our clients get. But you got to remember, when the bad guy sends an email to our client, we look at it and say, there's no way that's from that title company, right? Or the escrow company. Linda Lou would never use a private email. Linda Lou @fatco@yahoo or something like that. We notice it because we do it all day. You got to remember, your client is confused from the outset. They're getting a lot of information right away. They're not in multiple escrows like you are, in and out, in and out. Every email they get is confusing to them. Things are new. When someone emails them and says, "Oh, we have to hurry up and get that wire in today because the Fed is going to close for the next 6 months." They close every summer, right? And then they're going to say, "Oh, I didn't know that." I had $1 million one where they said, "We're checking the boxes and we're getting rid of all of our stuff." We opened escrow yesterday, and the guy got an email from us saying the wire needs to be sent today, 24 hours into escrow. Luckily, he telephoned our agent and said, I like your style. That's how I like to do things. I like to take care of what I can take care of right away. The money's just sitting there. I am going to wire it this afternoon. And our agent said, is Scoobity Wubbity? And they said, oh, you just emailed me and said the wire needs to go to this new number and I'm going to take care of it. And we're like, don't send it. Let me give you my personal account and you can send it to me. No, that's not what he said. So we dodged the bullet on that one. So wire fraud is just such a big deal. We have to talk about it like we're little kids. We just have to keep saying it. It's out there, it's out there, it's out there. You can tell your client, it's okay to be totally confused. It's okay to call escrow 10 times. No one will ever say, why are you bothering me again about the wire information? They would never say that. And you're only going to do 1 or 2 of them in the deal. And that's it. There's no insurance. It's a mystery, all right? There's no product out there yet that can save us. Banks are letting people, they go in. It's not like the wire gets sent to, Northern Canada. It gets sent to Wells Fargo down the street. I mean, the address is literally in town. The bad guy goes in, everything about them is fake. They don't have to wear a disguise or anything. They have a false ID, false passport, false. They open up the account. $74,000 or $740,000 is wired into it the next day. It seasons in 24 hours and they withdraw it and, they head off to St. Louis and buy a football team. And there's nothing we can do about it. That's just the break. So it's not going away. It's okay to be silly. You can even put it in your email and just warn your client.
That's a great information today. Does anybody have any questions that they want to ask Darren before we let him get on with his day?
Looks like Lori Garcia has a question.
Lori, why don't you go ahead again?
It's in the chat, but basically I'm just saying in that last scenario regarding the home inspection, here was my recent situation. The buyer waived the home inspection. 1 week into escrow, they decide they want a home inspection, but says it's for their information only. My seller grants approval for the home inspection. The inspector of course comes back with a few things, and now they're saying they want them fixed, but they said they're not going to submit a request for repair. So it's putting a lot of pressure. It was putting a lot of pressure on my client if they should do those repairs, not do those repairs. We ended up, I advised my client, you're better off just going ahead and taking care of those things. They weren't too big, but at least we did it. My comment and question is that I'm starting to see more and more in this type of market, more and more people waiving the home inspection, but then like you said, coming back and asking for things. So is it better for them, or is it better to just do it through a request repair, just do it and then document it? That's what we ended up doing. So that's
you did fine. There's no answer. And I think we're going to see a lot of this. We're going to see a lot of what we're going to get is, I'm trying to remember, I'm being recorded. So I was going to make a joke about dating and how you don't really know who you're dating. So I'm not going to make that joke. Okay. Right. But we're going to get these offers and they're going to say, I'm clean and I don't want anything. I don't need clean offer, cash, no inspection, whatever. And then halfway through, it's an FHA loan, and you just have to deal with it. And the way you handled it is perfect. It's fine. Do the repair, button it up, send them the paperwork that you did. The problem that the buyer has in doing your scenario is, that's not a negative for the seller. If a buyer goes out and says, hey, I know I wasn't going to do an inspection. I did one. I found 3 things wrong. Well, guess what? The TDS was just modified. You as a buyer are now aware of those 3 things, and the seller is more protected. Thank you, Mr. Buyer, for learning those things during escrow. You cannot make an argument later that you didn't know these things, and you can't even make an argument about the ripple effect of those things. I mean, if you found a small problem, for example, if you found a little bit of mold in one area, well, who knows how deep that mold goes, and why wouldn't it be in other parts of the house, depending on how, you know what I mean? So they've really set themselves up for having more information than they had before, which increases the disclosure to them, which makes it a kind of a better transaction, because the more knowledge, the better. But you did the right thing. I mean, you can make a decision. They can say, thank you for the inspection. We will not be making any repairs. And then if this buyer doesn't close escrow, you have a new dilemma, because now you have to get that information to buyer number 2. But you did the right thing, in my opinion, because you were reasonable and positive, and you guys did the repair and you sent them the info, and then now they probably had a positive feeling about you because you, even though you didn't have the obligation to do it, you did it and whatever. But we're going to see a lot of this, and we're going to continue to see this. If prices flatten and it gets a little bit more even as to who has power, okay. But right now, the offer you're seeing is probably not 100% accurate, right? I myself tried to buy another home, and public record shows it sold for less than my offer. And I think, how did they pull that off? And they probably wrote a cleaner, apparently cleaner offer than mine. And then when they went to close or whatever, they asked for money because of repairs and whatever. Whereas if they had done a highest and best and come back to me, I would have probably gone up higher. And that's why you can't disclose what your client knows. If they knew how much my wife wanted this house, I would have been in trouble. You know what I mean? And so we're going to see a lot of that. It's like a wolf in sheep's clothing, basically. There, that's a good way to put it. I was going to see my dating joke just wasn't necessary. I can just say wolf in sheep's clothing.
Cecily had a question. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Cecily, if you want to unmute yourself.
Yes, my question, I'm not sure how to ask it, but I guess my question really is, sellers don't even have to respond to requests for repairs at all.
Correct. That is correct.
Does that put the seller at a greater risk when things have been found, and or if, inspections have not been waived, etc.? Do we?
No, it's all strategy. I mean, again, when the buyer does an inspection and it comes back and it's kind of messy, and there's lots of things requested, that really puts the buyer behind the 8 ball, not necessarily the seller, because there's an indirect disclosure of things going wrong with the home. So no, the seller has no obligation to respond to repair request. They can or they cannot. Many times you'll see it because you're thinking, well, I really don't want this buyer to go away, and it's not that much money, and so I'd rather just not have them walk, and I will make the repair. So it's just strategy. I mean, in this market, I have a lot of people who call and say, we found all these things, the seller won't repair anything, and they're just going to put it back on the market, and they told us to go jump in the lake. And I'm like, yeah, that is their prerogative. They have the power to do that. So you're absolutely right. Repair request comes over. Now, if in the RPA, the buyer said, you will pay up to X amount of money towards any repairs requested by my inspector, and the seller pins their name to that, that's a different story. But no, for the most part, a repair request is just that. We default back to the prior contract, whatever's been mutually agreed to. The seller doesn't have to come out of pocket and pay for anything.
All right.
Thank
I don't know
you.
how much more time you have, but we have a couple more questions. You have more time?
Sure.
Real
Yeah.
quick. We kind of went over it, but waiving contingencies to get the offer accepted. Amy, you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, my question is because one time I heard that because this crazy market, someone was advising, okay, if you want your offer accepted, you could waive some of the contingencies, like for example, loan. If you think that the buyer is in a good stand, they can really are gonna be accepted by the lender and everything is gonna go smooth, you can waive the loan contingency. Also the home inspection, like you just mentioned. Because if you see that the house is in a good condition and stuff like that, so you can also waive the home inspection.
You can.
In order to make the offer more attractive to the seller.
You can absolutely do that. And when your client does do that, you want to have a discussion with them. And we can't whip out a hold harmless for every 40 seconds when we're dealing with our clients, but you kind of want to train yourself. This goes back to, in my talk today, was example number 4, where the buyer did that exactly. And then they got really frustrated and scared. And even though nothing went wrong, they filed against us anyway out of mere frustration. So you would have to send an email to say, we can certainly do that. You have to understand the remedy for the seller will be that if you really can't get your loan on because the appraisal comes in too low, for example, you could be at risk of losing your EMD. And, you know, luckily that is the downside for a buyer versus specific performance, which we don't even have to get into. So,
Right.
but the buyer's loss potentially will be the EMD, but they can certainly make themselves more attractive. It's just, it does, in fact, it's a risk. And what you don't want to do is encourage that. And you don't want, you know, you wouldn't want them to say, well, you told me, you know, to do this, and you told me that was the only way I could get the deal on, etc. So we just communicate, and email is your best friend. It's, I've been doing this so long. I was around, you know, before email. Email was out there, but it wasn't as big as it is now. It used to be faxes. That's how you save the day, right? That's how you reminded your client that they did something. So in emails, we talk objectively and we let them know that, you know, we certainly can do that. And the risk is your lender does not come through, right? Or it doesn't appraise. But, you know, and there's no answer to these things. It's just, this is why it's so fun to be a realtor.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
All right, one last question, Denise. You want to say your question and then we'll call it a day.
Hi, Darren. How are you?
Good.
Good. Thank you for answering, and thank you for being here. It was very informative. I have something that's kind of off the wall, but I'm showing buyers some new home builds, and they're not completed yet. However, talking to other people, there's situations that a lot of the builders are delayed because of what's going on, or supply demand, or different things like that. And so what happened is the builder said it's going to be ready by, you know, January 4th, and it wasn't. And so what happened, rates went up, and then they had a rate lock. It got, you know, it got delayed. So the rate lock ended, and now instead of, like, you know, 3.4, they're going to have like a 4, you know, or a 3.8. And so is there a way, when you sign a contract with a builder and they have a specific date that it's supposed to be finished, and it goes over that date, most people are fair, you know, for a couple of weeks or whatever, but if it's going over and getting delayed, is there a way, if you have to put points for points to get your rate back down there, a lot of the buyers are like, no, thank you. But then if you go out and buy a new home, it's, you know, it's going to bite you in the bum as well. So is there a way that you can, talking to other people, there's people that have sent a letter from their attorney saying, oh, you better, you know, you promised me this date, you're going to have to pay for the difference. Do you have any suggestions on that? Before we go into it, and I hit some of that, because talking to many people, that there are delays.
Oh, there's no answer. There's two worlds, right? There's resale, and you basically have time is of the essence, and the seller has to give you the house, etc. You have a great form written by the California Association of Realtors. You move to the builder world, it's totally different. I guarantee every builder home, for the most part, you're looking at has a clause that says the close date is estimated, and we have the power as the builder to move the close date in the event of, it could be sole discretion, or it could be, you know, usually it's sole discretion. And sometimes if you look close, it'll say they have up to 180 days, sometimes longer. So that is just, you know, there's no answer to that. It's definitely, you know, that close date isn't as
solidified,
as strong, right, with builders.
Yeah.
And so,
okay, because like I said, sorry, please go ahead.
I just had one where they wouldn't close. We lost our loan lock. All these things happen, you know, and the poor buyer had to go out and get an attorney and sue the home builder. And that got the attention of the builder, and the builder let them, the builder wasn't even going to let them close. Doesn't matter about paying a higher rate or anything. And that got the builder to close escrow with our buyer. And that's just crazy unfortunate. to have to get an attorney and file a list pendants and sue a national builder. So that is an option. I mean, the buyers can always go, you know, the buyers can always go get an attorney. But so our job would be, when we're talking to them in this market, you say, you know,
Right.
let's talk about timelines. Let's talk about, what if the builder doesn't come through on January 4th? Who is your lender? You know, it's my brother-in-law. And it's like, well, he better be good, because we've got other lenders you can talk to. Because here's the deal. You probably want to try to extend that loan lock as far out as you can. You want to talk now about how do you keep that loan lock in case the builder blows it and doesn't come through, because we know in this market that this can happen. So everything you mentioned is valid, and there's no answer to it. Awesome,
Okay.
right?
But I appreciate that, because like I said, it's people mention like Laura, and I do
Oh,
give them,
there's so
you know, our lenders options and all of that stuff. But
Yeah.
I just, you know, you feel badly, because sometimes, you know, if it's an investment property, for an investor, you say, okay, well, you have a house to live, but if
Right.
it's for a buyer, you displace them, you know,
Right.
like it's a
You
big
really
deal.
want to
So,
have this discussion. You want to tell people how bad it can get. Can you move in with your
Okay.
brother-in-law? Because, you know, maybe it's a great idea to get rid of house number one and you got nowhere to go. Can you temporarily move in with that horrible, you know, brother-in-law who likes
In-law.
the Detroit Lions or whatever, right? Somebody, a Rams fan. Try hanging out with those
Yeah.
guys right now, you know what I'm saying? But you want to have those horrible discussions now so people are aware. Human beings love bad news. We just want to know what in the world is going on. We don't care necessarily that it's bad or good. We want to know what's happening. If you tell someone there is a chance that this is going to happen and it happens, they're like, okay, I remember that you said that. It's the domino.
Well, and
people.
I have those discussions, and I always put everything in writing through
Yep.
via email or
You gotta get
text.
ready.
But I just wanted to, and then communication is key. It's massively important. So I do that. I have already spoken with that, like right when someone asked me about new builds, just because it happens a lot.
I just
And
had a
so,
new build, and I just had a new build. The contract says you have to close escrow on certificate of occupancy. Certificate of occupancy is way different than
Right.
throwing a Super Bowl party in your house. There were no appliances in the multi-million-dollar new home.
See,
And we're
that's
telling a buyer to move in, take escrow, commence your mortgage payments, and there's nowhere to put your milk. This
I
is
know,
what
that's-
we're
Heater
dealing
or
with.
something.
And so, you know, they put temporary appliances in. That was their concession. They were going to close escrow without appliances because they got
Crazy.
and
CLO.
that's crazy too. Yeah, that happens all the time too. And it's
So,
like,
you know,
and they're
we want to
months
talk
out.
about worst
Yeah.
case scenarios all the time. We want to talk about where you're going to put your
Awesome.
stuff. You know, it's going to get rough. It's not the end of the world if you have to move into someplace else or get an apartment. But, you know, just know that that's a possibility. So people can keep that in the back of their mind. And sometimes they can have a safety valve. In my scenario number 4, we already knew that the client could live with their parents, and that's where they stored their children and themselves. What we didn't have was a place to put their stuff. Like if you've ever seen the movie The Jerk, it's not the money, it's all the stuff.
All right. Well,
But that was very
everybody.
helpful. Thank you so much.
Yep.
I appreciate you spending so much time with us, Darren. Thank
Yep.
you to all of our area managers, Carol, Alicia,
Thank
and Joe McGowan. And we had about 75 people on here. I'm sure we'll have 75 more watch the replay. So thank you for
Good.
letting me record it, Darren. I appreciate you.
Yes, see you next time.
All right. See you
Bye.
later. Bye-bye, everybody.